On va donc appeler effectivement la prochaine session « Nouvelles tendances de consommation en Inde et en Asie ». L'exposé de M. Apothécaire a parfaitement effectivement passé le relais. Alors quelles sont ces tendances? Justement, aujourd'hui, la question paraît essentielle lorsque l'on sait que la population compte 8 milliards d'individus et qu'à elles seules, la Chine et l'Inde regroupent plus de 40% d'entre eux et que ces deux géants comptent pour un tiers des dépenses globales des consommateurs dans le monde. Pour cette table ronde, des chaises, en fait, 3 panélistes se sont désistés, mais peut-être ont-ils été effrayés de la qualité des 2 panélistes qui sont restés, de l'industrie du luxe. Monsieur Abheek Singhi, directeur général du BCG, le Boston Consulting Group, auteur également d'ailleurs du best-seller du BCG, The 10 Trillion Prize, ou Comment captiver les nouveaux riches en Chine et en Inde, qui avait été publié chez Harvard Business Review Press, qui a maintenant quelques années, mais qui est certainement encore extrêmement intéressant à lire. Si M. Singhi peut monter sur scène. Please, Mr. Singhi, if you can come up on the stage. Thank you very much for your presence. J'appelle également Aseem Kaushik, directeur général de L'Oréal Inde, en charge également du développement du leader mondial des cosmétiques au Népal, au Bangladesh et au Sri Lanka. Bienvenue, Monsieur Kaushik. Please welcome on the stage. Pour cette table ronde, j'appelle Michel Beaugier, coprésident de ce forum APAC et membre du conseil d'administration des CCE. Voilà.
Microphone, please. Okay. Please take a seat. Abheek. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we're going to have this session in English. It's a good occasion to test if the translation by Wordly makes it as well from English to French. You understood that we have a situation. 3 panelists have resigned in the last week, so we were supposed to be 5. But I heard from Abheek, when we were preparing this session, I heard from Abheek that Boston Consulting Group were 3 of them, and L'Oréal works 4. So in total, we have 7, right? We have 7 panelists. The objective of this panel is to highlight the differences or the similarities between the Asian/Chinese consumer and the Indian consumer. We know well China, we know the market, we know the shoppers, we are familiar with the internet platforms, with the virtual influencers. The only question mark which remain in how to tackle the Chinese consumer is how far artificial intelligence, as Thierry Apothécaire explained, how far and how fast this artificial intelligence will bring us. But the Indian shopper and the Indian market, which is so fragmented, is still a mystery. This is why we have those 2 experts here. And I will throw my first question to Abheek of the Boston Consulting Group. India is not one India. There are different cats to India, for the luxury, for the retail space, for the premium space. What are the ways to think about this fragmented India?
Yes. Just wanted to do a sound check. Am I audible? Yes. Okay. So over the lunch break, somebody told me that, post-lunch session is, of course, a very difficult session to have. And so I'm going to start not with an answer to your question, but just with a little bit of a quiz for the audience. Can I have the first slide, please?
The slides, please.
Okay. Yeah, technology for some reason never. Perfect. Right. So one of the challenges about talking about the consumer is all of us is a consumer, all of us are consumers, and therefore we imagine that the rest of the world is also like us. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a show of hands. So, these are three consumers who are very similar, but they are very different. The first one actually sells food, fresh food in Aligarh, which is a small town near Delhi. The second is somebody who's Anita, who lives in Jaipur and actually has a small business. And the third is Pranav, who's, as you can make out from the dress, he's actually doing, working in a corporate. And they are similar and they are yet very different. So how many of you think they're number one, Forbes 40 under 40, or they are actually from the same family, or the third of them, actually they have received venture funding in Shark Tank India, or fourth, they actually belong to the same income segment. Any guesses? How many of you think it's A? Okay. How many of you think they are B? Anyone? How many of you think they are C? Okay. A few hands. How many of you think they are actually D? Yeah. So the actually answer is D. They are the same income segment. They all belong to the top 10% of India. On the first one, which is sort of the most counterintuitive one, there's actually somebody who had a similar stall in Delhi in a place called UPSC, which caters to the Indian civil service exams. And now that person who started his first stall some 30 years back, he actually has a large house in Delhi, which is worth upwards of $10 million. So you can actually make a lot of money selling hot, fresh food. The second one, and then I'll move to your question, Michel, is what do you think is the most common occupation in this village, which has a population of less than 10,000? The first, which is actually pottery, supplying to international brands. The second is actually online content creators. The third is yoga gurus. The fourth is dentists. So how many people think it's A? Anyone? How many people? Okay, a few more. How many people think it's B? Okay. How many people think it's C? Yoga gurus. And how many people think it's D? So this is a very smart audience because the maximum number of people, both for question 1 and question 2, actually got it right. It has actually got the maximum number of content creators. Moving to the question, Michel, then what you asked, there are many Indias. And I think the way I would answer this question is really think about India on multiple dimensions. And I just want to present this one picture of India. And really, 4 dimensions. I did not, start with the most obvious one. I'm actually starting with the one which is women. Female literacy across different states in India varies from less than 60% to more than 95%, with the average being about 75, 77%. And to give you a sense of how this has changed, it's actually changed by 20 percentage points over the last 2 decades. Median age, everybody thinks of India as a young country, and yes, it is. But actually, there are states in the southern part of India whose median age is actually very similar to the US today. So the range is 22 to 35, and actually there are states which are very similar to the US today. Urbanization 10 to 90% with an average of slightly less than 40. And of course, income, which ranges again a lot. So there are many Indias, and not only from an income perspective. And to my mind, that's an important thing. Everybody intuitively realizes that there are many Indias from an income perspective. But I think on many other dimensions, there is a vast variation across India. And the way, at least I would think about it, is the southwest of India is almost similar on a set of dimensions The north is slightly different, and if you look at the east, it's very different. So there are many Indias, at least on some of the parameters that I talked about.
Thank you, Abheek. I will turn now to Aseem. I remind you that Aseem is the CEO of L'Oréal, our national champion in the beauty world. China is 10 times the size of India in terms of revenues. The middle class in China is 500 million, when in India it's around 250 to 300 million. In China, 80% of women are working. In India, only 20%. How do you manage within those parameters to make L'Oréal a champion?
Thank you, Michel, for asking this question. Just for the context, because not everyone is from the beauty industry in the forum, I would like to say that L'Oréal has been in this country now for 30 years. We started operations in India in 1994, 30 years ago, and this was the time we started with one brand. The brand was called Garnier. I hope all of you know Garnier, and this was the time when I started with L'Oréal 30 years ago, trying to put Garnier shampoos in small shops everywhere in some deep parts of the country. So for 30 years, and 2 words on the company, we have 2 factories in India. We are present in 1.8 million retail outlets. The small mom and pop stores which you have seen on the street side, small mini marts, grocers, etc. Our products today are present in 1.8 million retail outlets. We are in close to 4,500 towns and cities, and of course headquartered in Mumbai. But 90% of the units which we sell in India are produced locally. So we have 2 factories where we produce it. And also we have 2 R&I centers where we have about 120 scientists who are working with us for creating very specific formulations, innovations, and also products for not just India, but also for Southeast Asia, and also in skincare for sometimes patenting some new innovations for the world. So that's where we are. But coming back to what Abheek told you, it's not one India. In the end, 1.4 billion people, and everyone thinks, oh my God, it is going to be the most amazing opportunity which you can just come in and take. It's not that simple. The fact is, 70% of this population lives in almost 600,000 plus villages. And 30% of the population approximately lives in close to about 5,500, depending on what you want to call urban or rural, we can always debate, between 5,000 to 6,000 towns or cities, if you want to call it. And the fact is that the middle class, and I'll come back to the middle class in numbers in India is closer to about 300 million, very rightly said. The fact is that this middle class is only going to grow because we know that the GDP, as we talked about, is going to grow at anywhere between 6, 7, 8, depending on who you are talking to for the next 3, 4, 5 years. So more affluence will happen, and we think more and more middle class will happen. But where is this middle class going to be stationed? What we see is, in terms of potential, there is a lot of urbanization which is happening in India. So if you look at urban India, it accounts for almost, depending on the industry, and I could talk about the beauty industry, almost 80% of the potential in terms of market size. So what you're looking at is urban India, 30% population, then you go to some affluent households. And how are we in India looking at affluent households? For us, anyone who spends more than $20 a day is a possible L'Oréal consumer in this country. So if you look at how many of them exist in India, there are about 230 million of these people in India, stationed largely in urban India, but also spread out across almost 5,000 cities, and some very, very rich people living in rural area as well. So coming back to comparing ourselves with China and how many women work in India versus there, it is imperative that any country's growth has to be equally led by women participation. And today we are at 20% kind of a rate in terms of women working in India. We estimate that this, by 2030, should be closer to almost 40%. This is going to bring in also the key societal shift. Sorry, I'm taking a little longer than, it's okay?
Okay.
Yeah. So this is bringing in a key societal shift in the country. The gender codes are very, very rigid in this country, and you know about it, you read about it in newspapers, etc. But they are evolving. As more and more women get into workforce, more urbanization happens, a lot of families move to bigger cities, and these are smaller families, husband, wife, 1 or 2 kids, and we call them the nuclear families. And when that starts to happen, affluence, we call them the DINKs, D-I-N-K, which is double income, no kids kind of scenario. And then, of course, they have 1 kid who they want to spend all the money on for making sure, something like China, where, that's the obsession which everyone has on educating them and giving them the best possible. So this, when that happens in terms of evolution, we think that more and more you will have the opportunity of selling products in categories such as ours, like beauty category. But this is also kind of surfing on the education of the consumer, which becomes very, very important, because they get to understand more, they get to learn more, and then, of course, decide better what they want to use. So, sorry for a long answer, but...
No. It's perfect and very, very interesting. Abheek, important question to you. What is the difference between the Chinese shopper and the Indian shopper?
Yeah. So this is a question I prepared for. And, like Mark Twain said, I'm writing a long letter because I didn't have time to, write a short one. This one I will keep it shorter. I think there are 2 things which I see very common themes between India and China. We actually did a survey, and this is pre-COVID. We did a survey across India, China, and 15 other markets. And one of the questions we asked, is your life better than what your parents' was? And do you think your children's life will be better than yours? In Western world, about 70% people said that their children's lives will not be better than what their lives were. In India and China, actually close to 80% felt that their kids' life, their children's life, will be better than theirs. So there's a common sense of optimism, confidence, hope that the future is going to be brighter than what it is today. I think that's one common theme which is there. The second, and I think this is again a common theme. Both Indians and Chinese are very value conscious, but there is one thing that they will spend on a lot, which is the kids' education. The tiger mom concept, I think, is exemplified by the consumers in India and China. So those are the 2 similarities. I will point out 2 differences as well. I think the first is the role of women, you know, Aseem talked about it. I think in many dimensions, not only in terms of education or in terms of participation in workforce, but the role of women in India is very different than the role of women in China. It is changing. You know, one interesting statistic to just keep in mind, the difference between male literacy and female literacy in India used to be a 25 percentage point gap in mid-1995. In 2016, something remarkable happened. The number of women entering high school was actually more than boys. In 2020, the number of girls entering colleges is more than boys. But it is still a wide gap between China and India. So that's one difference that I would talk about. The second is urbanization. You know, India and China were at a similar point about 35 years back with about 20%, 21% urbanization. China today is close to 60% urbanized. India, you know, depending on, as Aseem said, depending on how you define, it's 35 to 40%. So I think two big similarities, two big differences.
Thank you. L'Oréal preaches collectivism and tries to gather consumers around the power of innovation. I remember when I went to your HQ in Paris, Asmita Dubey greeted me as welcome to the Silicon Valley of cosmetics and of beauty. So innovation, technology is very important for you. How do you pass the message through this, your consumers?
Michel, you have to know that for 30 years, like any other company in FMCG, as we call it, or the fast-moving consumer goods category, the two biggest barriers you could face coming in as a foreign company or any other company and trying to do business in India were, firstly, if you had products, you had to go deep in distribution for them to be available for consumers to come and pick it up. So deep distribution was one of the biggest barriers for any company in India. And the second barrier was, how do you identify the set of consumers out of the 1.4 billion who would probably be the one who would be interested in your product? And the only way to communicate and talk about your product, inform about your product, educate about your brands was through either TV or print. And it was one of the most ineffective medium you could think of when you are building a business or a brand in a country like this, because you're talking to 1.4 billion people. And then within that, what you're looking for is the top 100 million who will probably see the same advertisement on the TV or read the same print magazine, etc. These two barriers, and especially led through the acceleration of digitalization in India, have gone, literally. When we say deep distribution, yes, 1.8 million retail outlet of presence of L'Oréal products. It's a sachet of hair color at €0.5, which is present in all these retail outlets. Incidentally, we are #1 in hair color category in India because we created the first hair color for the market here in India almost in 1996. The fact is, this is now replaced with e-commerce, which makes your products available in 99% of the PIN codes in the country. And the second part is essentially the digitally connected consumers. I'm sure you guys have now gone through where people have talked about how almost 800 million consumers in India are connected to internet. They are paying on their phone, etc., etc. But they're also spending almost close to 6 hours a day watching content on their phone. So, as you know, trivia, because we are talking trivia now, all the Chinese apps, including TikTok, are banned in India. So there is no TikTok in India. So what we have is 6 hours of people who are spending time on social, 1/3 of that, on YouTube, on Instagram, on some of the other gaming platforms. They are spending time on doing work, conducting business. But this is 6 hours of me time or very close connected time with the phone. And this is the moment where you can really identify, talk to each consumer. And when we talk about L'Oréal, we always say that we are a beauty tech company. And when we are talking about beauty tech, we're then about talking beauty for each rather than beauty for all. So individually, we can now in India have a conversation about our products, our brands, which may be very specifically being searched about by the consumer when they're on the mobile phone. So what it pans out in front of us is an amazing opportunity in the coming next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. As we talked about the demographic dividend with the gentleman before, theory, when he was talking about how we have a very young population and it will continue to be coming in with little more money to spend on disposable incomes.
Tell me, you have a, I don't know if I should name it an application or a technology, which is called virtual try-on, which is, you call it Modiface, I think, in your L'Oréal language. Can you explain to the audience in 2 minutes what is this try-on?
Now imagine, okay, thank you for that, Michel. Imagine you're on e-commerce or on online, right? And you want to sell somebody a lipstick. It's impossible for you, anyone, and all the ladies in the house would know that they want to try that lipstick first and then decide if they really like the shade or not, right? But if your strategy of going in and building business is through digital and e-commerce, we invested in an acquisition of in Canada called, this company is called Modiface. It's a virtual try-on. So today, all the e-commerce platforms in India which sell beauty, whether it is Amazon, whether it is the Walmart Group's Myntra or Flipkart, or it is our own local pure beauty player which is doing extremely well, Nykaa. They all run on the Modiface technology, which is from L'Oréal. And you can go there and you can actually see and try out lipsticks virtually to find the best shade for you, and also try out skincare routines and requirements in terms of benefits which you are seeking by scanning your skin by a picture which you can take on your mobile phone. So technology will play a big role in times to come to really have a business which is built on the most used word which everyone wants in business, the ROI. And this will continue to help, powered with also a lot of data, insights on consumers and understanding them better and getting to them exactly what they want and deserve.
Thank you. Abheek, look at the slide which is behind you and also in front of you. Okay? 300 million people users. India is currently the second largest internet market. India will become the third largest online retail market by 2030. E-commerce constitutes 10% of the total retail market, which is, by the way, quite low compared to the 30 to 40% average that we may find in the rest of Asia. By 2030, the Indian shoppers base will reach 500 million. 80% of households will have access to internet. 80% of households will have access to internet, even with the very low urbanization rate by 2026. Internet, it's cell phone for the Indians. Number of users of smartphone will reach 1.2 billion by 2026. 80% of the population will purchase stuff, things from the telephone. 50% of the e-commerce transactions are done with a digital wallet. And it will be the topic of the panel tomorrow morning, digital infrastructure, UPI, eKYC, know your customer, Aadhaar, which is the identity card system developed in India, have reduced the time to onboard consumers by 80%. So my question is, India is one of the most digitalized countries in the world. Is the future of India e-commerce or brick and mortars?
So, about a decade back, I was on a panel similar to this. BCG and I had authored a report on what's going to happen to e-commerce in India. On my left-hand side was a gentleman, Kishore Biani, who had the largest number of retail stores in India, physical retail stores. On my right-hand side was Sachin Bansal, the founder of Flipkart, one of the largest e-commerce players. And both of them disagreed with the projection that we had made. One thought it was too high, the other thought it was too low. Okay. Now, why am I saying this? I don't know whether these numbers will actually pan out exactly the way it's articulated, because India has the ability to surprise everybody. 1.5 years back, nobody would have thought that quick commerce would become as large as it has today. But to your question, Michel, I think there is, and it is clear evidence that what e-commerce digital is doing is actually expanding the pie. It is not necessarily at the expense. If you look at the last decade, actually the general trade has also grown, of course at a lower number. Modern trade has also grown, and e-commerce has also grown. So all three have grown, and the overall pie has grown. I think what's going to happen is we will see all three grow, number one. Number two, depending on which India you are catering to, are you catering to the top 100 million urban? Are you catering to the middle 500 million rural? The role that digital from a retail perspective will play will be very different. But to the point that Aseem was also making, I see the role of digital as informing, influencing, and invoicing, all three. Informing and influencing between the top and the middle and the bottom, in terms of influencing between the top and the middle and the bottom, urban, rural, it is critical. There's no doubt. On the commerce side, I think depending on the segment, depending on the category, it is going to be different. But if today you are a player in India, if you don't have digital as a part of your strategy, you're going to be dead in the next 5 years.
Thank you.
Actually, taking a cue on Q-commerce, quick commerce, just to explain to everyone, quick commerce is a recent phenomena in India. It has been tried out in a lot of countries across the world, and it has failed, where you're talking about ordering something and it arrives at your doorstep in 15-20 minutes, sometimes half an hour. And but unlike anywhere else in the world, this channel which is emerging in the country right now is actually quite profitable and is working very, very well, and it's exploding. And you should, with some of your Indian colleagues who are part of the delegation, try out ordering anything, and it will arrive in precisely less than 10 minutes at your doorstep. You can park your car outside in a parking area, you put that location, and you order a small can of Coke. In precisely less than 10 minutes, that Coke can, a cold one, will arrive in your car. A lot of people are ordering things when they're stuck in traffic. The worst traffics in Bangalore and Mumbai than Delhi. In fact, we were surprised ourselves. Why would somebody want a lipstick in less than 10 minutes? and we said it will never work. But we recently launched with Maybelline, one of our brands, a full new range which was launched on quick commerce, and it exploded. Actually, people wanted to have that in 10 minutes flat time, and it was great. The fun fact is Apple iPhone 16. And Apple normally you see in newspapers, one day before there is a huge queue outside their retail outlet and everyone wants to get the new Apple 16 or 17 or whatever. In India, they launched it on Q-commerce. So you could actually get your iPhone 16 in 10 minutes flat at your house, and you did not have to stand in a queue outside. So why does it work in India versus why doesn't it work anywhere else in the world? The logic is quite clear if you look at it. It's the urban concentration. The urban concentration in big cities of affluence and of disposable income, and the overall cost of labor to deliver something on the small little bike in 5 minutes, 10 minutes time, makes the whole P&L of a quick commerce kind of channel work brilliantly well. And of course, we are known for our services, making sure as to be delivered, and this is convenience which you can always take.
Though I have to say, I worry when my 17-year-old daughter and 20-year-old son are spending 6 hours on the phone and getting used to, this. I do worry when, if, will they learn patience or they will be used to getting things like this.
Short question to you, Aseem, and you may give us a short answer as well. Do you believe in virtual influencers in India? Let me explain. You all know what are the influenceurs. Influenceurs, vous savez ce que c'est. Virtual influencers, les influenceurs virtuels are created by computers, computer generated with the help of artificial intelligence. I was 2 weeks ago in a conference given by Clarins, one of your competitors, and they told me that they are using virtual influencers in China and in Spain as well. So do you believe in virtual influencers?
We believe in that, but I think we believe in a balance of human interaction, which is irreplaceable and the most invaluable part when you are having a conversation with your buyer or your consumer or somebody who would be interested in your brand. But of course, information, as Abheek said, sometimes you're only looking for information. You don't want to have a conversation with someone how to use a product. That part can be taken up very well with AI-based chatbots or virtual influencers, as we call it. But I think a larger conversation, a human interaction remains core to categories like beauty to maintain. So it will always be a balance because it's education versus information, conversation versus just getting some facts. So both will play a great part in driving this.
Thank you. Abheek, the last question for you. We have two French giants. One is established already in India. I name Decathlon. And the second one is aiming to come back to India after failing a few years back. It's Carrefour. So my question to Abheek, do you think that foreign companies, French companies, can succeed in this very fragmented scenery?
Short answer, yes, right? So let me start with that. And I think what Decathlon has done, I don't think anybody would have imagined that a sports retailer, an outdoor equipment retailer is actually going to be successful in India, both in terms of top line and bottom line. And to my mind, the couple of things that they have done is they have embraced India on India's terms while retaining their Frenchness. And I think that's a very important thing to have. Sometimes clients and companies say, when will India be ready? Honestly, India will never be ready. India is not another France, okay? And it will never be another France. India will be its own India. There are some codes which are common to people, consumers worldwide. I think Decathlon really tapped into the fact that there is an increasing awareness about health, wellness, tapped into the increasing affluence, but the value for money, perception and value which is there, and they offered service, but at a reasonable price, right? And they've been able to do that. And one of the things, many times is people would say in retail, okay, what's your cost per square foot? Honestly, it doesn't matter. The question is, what is your revenue per square foot? And that's what they focused on, giving the proposition which actually worked for middle India and really spent time in educating the consumer, in communicating that proposition and in delivering to that. And I would honestly give them 9.5 out of 10.
So now I will throw the last question for this panel to Aseem. Aseem, we all here, we watch the Olympic Games and we watch LVMH displayed in every 5 minutes on the French national TV. LVMH invests massively, heavily in sport. Not only in the Olympic Games, but also in Formula One, and now they are trying to get into soccer business. Chanel, most amazingly, Chanel go into sponsoring the Oxford-Cambridge rowing race, the boat race between Oxford and Cambridge. My question to L'Oréal boss now, are you getting into sport as well? As a group, not only in India, as a group.
Aseem, before that, so I asked Michel something about cricket just before the session, and Michel said, is that a sport?
He said, what is that? What is cricket? So, yes, Michel, you have to know that L'Oréal with its brands is supporting a lot of sports around the world. For example, Biotherms, which is one of our brands in the luxury products division, supports Ocean Ride, which is an endurance, sailing competition where everyone has to sail across the world in a small team, etc. We do that. And of course, in India, as you know, that we have possibly all the religions in the world present in this country. But there is one religion which everyone believes in, which is cricket. So, yes, with some of our brands like Garnier, we support and we are present and we are visible in creative ways to be seen next to the great player of the season or a team or during the big matches in the country, because engaging with the consumer where they are is the most important thing to build a business or a brand in the country. So we do that regularly in India. Thank you.
Thank you. My dear colleagues, CCE, I would like to ask you to send a big round of applause for our two panelists. Stay on the stage.
Very much, Michel, because l'intelligence artificielle te féminise, Michel.
Michael.
Non, elle te met Michel 2 LE. Donc sache-le, c'est pas encore tout à fait au point. Thank you very much, Abheek Singhi. Thank you, Aseem Kaushik. Et j'appelle Madame Catherine Chauvin, présidente de la commission APAC des CCE, que vous connaissez tous, pour remettre justement à nos panélistes, ainsi qu'à Monsieur Apothécaire. Montez sur scène, Thierry, de façon à ce qu'on puisse également vous remettre les remerciements du forum pour vos interventions. Catherine.